And Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My sister celebrated her engagement without inviting me, and my parents laughed about it. 7 months later, they lost everything, and my response to their desperate plea left them speechless. My life had always revolved around studying, sacrificing, and existing silently in the shadows, while my older sister enjoyed the unconditional love of our parents. They adored her, they called her their pride and joy, while I was just an afterthought, someone who had to achieve things for the good of the family's future. It wasn't a role I would have chosen, but I accepted it because I didn't seem to have another option. One afternoon, after hours immersed in textbooks and notes, I felt completely exhausted. I had spent the whole day locked in my small room studying and needed a break. I resorted to my favorite, though not the most productive, distraction and picked up my phone to browse social media. That's when I saw it. There was my sister, wearing an elegant dress, surrounded by many people at her engagement party. The photo caption revealed something that took my breath away. "We can't wait to celebrate our wedding in Hawaii with all our loved ones." Apparently, all her loved ones didn't include me. My parents appeared proudly next to her, elegantly dressed, smiling as if they had won the lottery. There were relatives I hadn't seen in years, all smiling and toasting with glasses of champagne. Everyone was there, everyone except me. They hadn't even bothered to let me know. My sister had always treated me like a stranger, but I never expected her to even bother to send me a simple message to tell me about her engagement. My parents, the same ones who constantly repeated the importance of family to me, did not consider that I was also part of it and did not inform me of the event either. To give you an idea of how my parents have treated me, I can tell you that I have spent entire summers working 2 part-time jobs so that they wouldn't have to worry about the bills, giving up nights out with friends so that I could study. I felt I had to make them proud, putting up with their endless lectures about how my future success was the family's retirement plan. My whole life has been planned around my efforts being the key to giving them a better future. My first impulse was to call my parents and demand an explanation. I needed to hear them tell me why I wasn't important enough to be included in this family celebration. I dialed their numbers, but only got their voicemail. I tried again with the same result. They weren't even answering my calls. I saw no point in calling my sister. What good would it do? She would either completely ignore me or, even worse, give me some half-baked excuse that would only deepen the wound. I had to face the painful truth that I had always avoided. I was expendable to them. 2 days later, I received the first notification from my parents, a message reminding me, "Don't forget to study hard." My finger hovered over the mute button for a moment before pressing it. I don't know why I hesitated, but I finally silenced their numbers. Then I did the same with my sisters. I worked hard all my life for the family, but I am only part of it when they need me, and I stop being part of it when I am no longer useful to them. If they didn't need me in their lives, maybe it was time for me to stop needing them in mine. Update 1. Weeks have passed, but I wanted to have something important to tell and not just small details. To begin with, my inbox was overflowing with messages from my father. I usually saw them after hours, as I was muted and didn't receive immediate notifications. At first, their tone was calm, almost sweet, as if nothing had happened. They wanted to know why I hadn't returned their calls, why I was so quiet and distant. My mother mentioned how worried she was, hoping that she wasn't stressed about exams, but her apparent concern soon gave way to passive-aggressive comments. She started insinuating that I was being ungrateful to them. She mentioned things like the special meals they had prepared for my birthdays, which was nothing out of the ordinary, and how they had helped me with college. The latter was not entirely true either, because as I mentioned before, I had worked to pay my tuition. My father also sent some messages, although not as many as my mother, but along the same lines of, "We did this for you and you can't even reply to our messages." It wasn't like this attempt to make me feel guilty was anything new, but hearing all that now, when I was already angry about what I had discovered, was completely unbearable. Then came more unpleasant messages, calling me spoiled and saying that my only concern should be to study and respond to my parents. That if I was wasting my time at parties, they would be very angry with me. I deleted each message without finishing reading them. I have put up with this kind of thing for years, but my parents can't expect me to be treated like a punching bag and to remain their obedient child forever. Recently, a cousin got in touch with me. We were close, but not the kind of cousins who talk all the time. That's why I didn't expect to hear from her, although I knew she had been at the engagement party. I had seen her in the photos my sister uploaded. She asked me why I hadn't attended the party. I explained that I hadn't even been invited. According to my parents, I hadn't attended because I needed to concentrate on my studies to get a well-paid job so that I could eventually pay the family back for their efforts. My parents had made it sound as if I had chosen it, but my cousin called to confirm if that was true. I feel like a cash cow, as if my parents only had me for the benefits. They expect me to give them a lot, while treating me like a simple farm animal. What had I done to deserve that treatment? I didn't skip parties or refuse to study long hours just to make them proud. But my cousin didn't stop there. She said she had heard from her parents that the wedding in Hawaii was not only a waste, but a financial catastrophe about to happen. My parents had emptied all their retirement savings and taken out a second mortgage to finance it. At the engagement party, my father had even joked with the guests about how by deciding to stay in education, I was helping them save money. There was some truth in that. Not inviting me would help them save money if they had spent so much, and I would be staying on at university to ensure their financial future. That night, sitting in my room, I decided to write a message to my parents. I wrote to them, just as they had done, listing all the times I sacrificed something to stay on at university at their insistence. It's not that I think studying is a bad thing, but my life has been completely organized around it, and I have done practically nothing else. I spent summers working and studying to get good grades. I didn't go to birthdays, outings with friends, and all the typical activities of young people, all to have a good profession, as my parents called it. And all for nothing, because that's how my parents reward me for my effort. An effort that they have never demanded of my sister. I didn't write it hoping that they would realize and apologize, because I know they never will. They don't see me as their daughter, they see me as their golden ticket to financial salvation. But I did write it to let off steam and to explain the current situation to them. When I pressed send, I expected to receive a reply fairly quickly, perhaps within a few hours. But there was silence for several days. Then, one morning, a message from them appeared in my inbox. The message was as cold and contemptuous as I feared. They accused me of being ungrateful and selfish, saying that I was acting like a capricious child by not attending a wedding when I should have been studying. My father wrote that I should stop playing the victim and concentrate more on my studies. My mother added a final reprimand, reminding me that family obligations entail sacrifices, something she said I wasn't making. I haven't replied to that message because it's practically identical to what they always say to me. They didn't even care to understand why I'm angry. All they care about is that I finish my studies, get a good job, and send them lots of money for them to spend on themselves and my sister. If there is anything I can thank them for, it is having taught me to be very disciplined in the value of hard work, because now I can meet their academic expectations. But no one says I have to send them money when I get it. Maybe they think so, but it's time to stop listening to them. Update 2. How have you been? I'm still dealing with my parents and my sister. I don't know if I can call them family at this point, because they've been anything but that to me. But here's my update on them. Late one night, I opened my laptop again and replied to their email. I had been holding in all my anger, and I needed to express it in a reply. I didn't want them to have the last word. I told them, without any ambiguity, that I did not owe them a single favor. Unlike my sister, I had not depended on their financial support for years. I told them about the lack of an invitation to the wedding and the jokes about saving money by not inviting me, which was a lie because it had not been my decision as they had made it seem. Finally, I ended things with a clean break. I explained that, being over 18 and able to live independently, I saw no reason to continue with this farce of a relationship. Clearly, they valued my sister more than me, so they could rely on her and her new husband for everything they would need in the future. If they needed money for when they retired, it would be better if that marriage was an oil well, as they had invested a lot in it, and now it had to produce black gold, or they would face many problems. After sending it, his reply arrived the next day, but I couldn't read it. I deleted it without opening it, knowing that it would only contain more of the same, attempts to shift the blame onto me and manipulate me. But the matter did not end there. Later that same day, while using my phone, I saw that I had a silent call from my mother. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the reject button, but finally decided to answer. The conversation was not very different from what she had said before, with the difference that now she insisted that the wedding was not about me, so I had no right to feel excluded. Besides, the wedding was my sister's, and she chose who attended and who didn't. I asked her how she would feel if the roles were reversed, if my sister invited me and I didn't even inform them. Even worse, if I made fun of them at the wedding. And not to mention the amount of money that would be saved because my father eats a lot, or because my mother likes to overdo it with the drinks. She tried to defend herself by saying that my father had been watching what he ate lately and that she only drank in moderation. But if 10 glasses of wine at a birthday party, the last time we had an event where we were all invited, is moderation, I don't want to imagine when she wasn't. I told her that if she wanted to continue showing favoritism, she was free to do so, because it was her life, but mine belonged to me and I could live it without them in it. I hung up because I didn't want to hear any more about how ungrateful I was from her perspective. Not even 5 minutes had passed when I received a call from my father. His tone was harder and more confrontational. He was angry about everything, but especially because my mother had told him that I had called him a glutton and her a drunk. Although on second thought, I think he was more offended by my description of him. I matched his tone and told him that respect was earned, not demanded. I had already earned a place in their hearts, but they had not even earned a visit from me when they were finally old and unable to look after themselves. He said that I wouldn't dare do that to them, because in our family we had always valued looking after each other, and abandoning some old people for a stupid wedding would be very low of me. I replied that I had finished trying to win their approval, and that they could save their sermons for someone they really cared about. Then I hung up. As neither of them had managed to convince me to remain docile, they decided to involve my sister in the situation. At this point I care very little what my sister says, because as I mentioned, we have never had a close relationship. I would have expected her to invite me to the wedding at least because we are sisters, but my main problem is with my parents, who made fun of me and are using me to ensure their financial salvation. Anyway, she called me later that night. She used the most falsely concerned voice she could find. She said she didn't understand why I was so upset, and that she had assumed I wouldn't care about the wedding since I was so busy with college. I told her that her assumption was just another example of how little she and the rest of the family valued or knew me. I told her that she was a spoiled and pampered child who had never worked for anything in her life. I told her that she owed our parents everything they had given her, including the engagement party and the wedding, and that she'd better get ready for when they needed her in their old age. For her, that was my responsibility. That's why my parents had demanded so much of me and my studies. Of course, they had given me countless lectures, punishments when I got a less than perfect grade and a childhood with nothing but hard work. Whereas she, on the other hand, had only received money, a normal or even rather indulged childhood, and even a dream wedding. She also accused me of being jealous and trying to ruin her happiness. I laughed as she spoke, telling her that she didn't need to ruin anything. She and our parents were doing perfectly well on their own, and I didn't need to get involved at all. I wasn't planning to confront my sister about all this, but she's gotten herself into this fight, and I don't mind directing some of my anger at her as well. Update 3. I have a lot to tell you after these months without any news from me. To begin with, the wedding has already taken place, and with it some major problems have also arisen. I started my internship at a company that I consider to be very good, one of the connections that my teachers helped me to make. The work was not easy, but I was thriving in it. They had even shown interest in offering me a full-time position, which seemed like a big step forward in my career to me. It wasn't the golden opportunity one had dreamed of as a child, but I had earned it with my hard work, and that made all the difference. During this time, I kept my distance from my parents and my sister. I knew they would keep trying to drag me back into their world of unrealistic expectations, constant manipulation, and unwarranted guilt. Then, one afternoon, I ran into an old family friend in a cafe. I'll call her A for future reference. She is one of my mother's closest friends. She recognized me immediately and asked how I was. We started with small talk, and she asked me about my studies and my family. I gave her general answers and mentioned that my relationship with my parents was not the best at the moment. But when she started talking about my parents, I knew something was wrong. She leaned towards me, as if she didn't want anyone else to hear, and told me that things weren't going well for them. My father had lost his job. I didn't know the exact details, but it seemed that he was having a hard time finding something that paid enough to cover his outstanding bills. She mentioned that my mother was working tirelessly, but it wasn't enough to fix the situation. The problem was serious. Her voice dropped as she told me how my parents' debts were piling up. Yes, she also specifically mentioned the expensive wedding in Hawaii. I tried to keep my composure, asking about my mother's health, pretending I didn't know how bad things were financially. But A was too focused on sharing the gossip to notice. She said she hoped my parents could resolve their situation, but it was hard to see how they could manage with so much debt. A few days later, I received a message from my mother from a new number saying they urgently needed to talk. She explained that my father was having trouble finding work and that they needed my financial help. They must have found out about my internship because now they were asking me for money. I didn't reply. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type something sarcastic or angry, but I held back. Instead, I simply deleted the message. I had nothing to say to them at that moment. A few days later, I ran into a cousin, someone I hadn't spoken to lately. He casually mentioned the current situation of the family. I know, I have a family of gossips who love to share other people's problems. He confirmed what I had already suspected. My sister's life was not as perfect as it seemed. Her marriage was going through difficulties due to all the pressure of my parents' debts. Apparently, her new husband's family were not happy with the amount of money spent on the wedding. They had also contributed financially, and now they were not satisfied with anything. They were not happy with that marriage, nor with my sister or my parents. That is basically what has been happening in my parents and my life during this time. Update 4. I was catching up on some work one afternoon when my phone vibrated with an unknown number. It was my mother again. This time she didn't have her usual authoritative tone, but sounded quite desperate and sad. She explained how their financial situation had completely spiraled out of control and how the wedding had been a terrible miscalculation. With my father losing his job, things had become more complicated than they had expected because they hadn't anticipated any of this happening just yet. She said she hoped that I had finally calmed down and reconsidered. My father then picked up the phone. He started by blaming his bad luck and explaining how things had got out of control and there was nothing they could do about it. He said he had been working tirelessly to resolve their situation, but nothing seemed to work. They didn't know who else to turn to, and I was their only hope. To be clear, they never apologized to me for what had happened. But there they were, asking for my financial help. Regardless of the fact that I don't want to do anything for them at the moment, I am working on an internship. It's a miracle that they are paying me anything. And although it is a good company, it is extraordinary that they are giving me a salary for the work I do. Many of my colleagues have gotten unpaid internships just for the work experience. So I'm not in a financial position to help them with anything. Besides, if they spend all their savings and resources on a party that lasted a few hours, they should be asking my sister for help, not me. I didn't enjoy a single sandwich at that party. I don't understand why I should get involved in this financial mess. My sister called me later that night from her husband's number. I assumed that another unknown number meant that it was one of them trying to contact me again. She was crying her eyes out. She said she didn't understand how things had gotten so bad, how her life had collapsed after the wedding. She begged me to forgive her, to forget the past, just to help them get back on their feet financially. It wasn't just my parents who were in debt. She and her husband were too. They had paid for some of the expenses, as well as their in-laws, and now they had no way of covering them. My parents had promised to help them with those expenses, as their credit cards were completely maxed out. I told her clearly that I wasn't interested in fixing things, especially if it meant a cost to me. These kinds of requests should be for the family, I explained, and I was never considered part of it. At least the family is invited to important events. But I wasn't invited, so I have no obligation to help them now. She stammered, begging me not to be so cold and insensitive. I replied that I wasn't being cold. I'd simply had enough of her behavior. I reminded her how easily they had erased me from their lives when everything was going well for them. I told her that this was not my problem and that it was not up to me to fix it. In the days that followed, I received all kinds of messages, emails, calls, apologies mixed with guilt and demands disguised as pleas for help, everything imaginable. But I systematically ignored them all. I'm enjoying this whole situation a little because they are getting exactly what they deserve for their behavior. And the best thing is that I'm doing absolutely nothing. They have tied the noose around their own necks with their decisions. The last message I received from my mother was just one simple line: "We're sorry. Please don't abandon us." I'm sorry too, but I have to abandon them. My response to that message was a list of cheap old people's homes near their area, telling them that they will need them in the future. Update 5. I have been asked what has happened to my parents and their debts, also about my sister's marriage and all the consequences of the extravagant wedding in Hawaii. I hope that what I have to tell you now is the definitive end of my story. And for those of you who are worried about me and not about my parents and my sister, I want to tell you that I have now got a permanent position in my company. Not only do I now have a decent salary, but I also enjoy some benefits while I continue to gain professional experience. I'm not sure if I will continue here for many years, as I don't know what opportunities will arise in the future. But if I have a possibility of advancing within the company, I feel comfortable enough to stay for a long time. My father has found a job, but it has not been enough to avoid the forced sale of the family home. They had a mortgage on it, which they took out to cover part of the wedding expenses. And from what I know, they also accumulated numerous credit card debts. Strange as it may seem, I didn't receive any more messages from them after my last reply with a list of retirement homes for their future. It's ironic that I'm now earning enough money to help them, thanks precisely to how much they insisted that I work hard academically, but that I don't do so because they only valued me in terms of my financial usefulness and not as their daughter. If, over all these years, they had shown that they loved me as their daughter and not as a long-term investment, today things between us and their economic situation would be completely different. I would probably never have had to write any of this. I still meet up with family from time to time because the city isn't that big, and they are the ones who keep me informed. They tell me that my parents still have a huge amount of debt, despite having sold their house, and that my father is not satisfied with either his salary or his new job. If my sister doesn't manage to radically change her situation, they are really going to need the list of cheap hostels that I sent them. My joke will become reality. As for my sister, she is not getting divorced yet, but they are living apart. It seems that the pressure from her in-laws has had an effect because they have managed to split up the marriage. The rumor is that the divorce is imminent, but neither of them has dared to file the papers officially. Can you imagine my sister getting divorced and getting married again in some exotic location? I would think that my parents have learned their lesson after all this, but I'm not so sure. And you know what? Now that my vacation is approaching and I'm receiving a real salary, and not a pittance, I've been considering a trip to Hawaii. Although I'm more inclined to save that money for a down payment on a house or an apartment, which would be a much more sensible decision. I think my vacation will be more modest, and I'll probably spend time just relaxing after years spent solely studying and working tirelessly. Addition, I have decided not to make the trip to Hawaii and to stay here for now. Perhaps in 3 or 4 months I will start looking for a place to buy according to my financial calculations.